Hey, Midland, thanks for joining us for this pop-up virtual planning studio on the Midland City Modern Master Planning process. I'm your host, Community Affairs Director Selina Harris, and with me tonight is Director of Planning and Community Development, Jacob Kain, and Community Development Planner, Brian Smith. And they are our resident experts on all things master planning. And tonight we're going to take your questions on the master plan process and basically cap off how many weeks, how many months actually of virtual or pop-up planning sessions where we've gone out to meet with the community and gather information about the master plan process that will guide our community for the next 30 years. So let's kind of start there, Jacob. I'm going to throw that question to you as we wait for a few questions to come in. What exactly is the master planning process?
Sure, that's a great question. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We are tonight having our 8th pop-up studio. So we started these back in October, and it's been a great chance to get out around Midland and meet folks where they are. And tonight we're meeting you wherever you are. We're here at the MCTV studios and glad to be here. So yeah, we've had a great process so far. The city kicked off our master planning process back in 2021. And a number of things happened during that initial phase, including some public surveys, walking tour, charrette type events, and other ways for us to sort of get the big picture of what people were looking for in the future of Midland. Since then, we kicked off phase 2 in October of 2022, and we've really been in public engagement mode since October. So in addition to our pop-up planning studios that we've had around the community, we've had a chance to do a number of other really interesting outreach events. A couple that I would highlight, we had our pizza and planning activity, which was a new take on meeting in a box that our friends at Grace Adele Memorial Library helped us to create. We had 34 groups around the city that hosted a pizza and planning activity and told us what their priorities were for the future. And so we really enjoyed seeing that feedback and the type of pizzas that people created. One of the other things that we're really proud of with this process is that we, as part of our effort to reach as many Midlanders as we could, we engaged with the public schools to engage youth in Midland. And so we were able to work with both Midland High and Dow High, with both Northeastern Middle School, Jefferson Middle School, and also St. Bridget Catholic School. And then with our local elementary schools through the 2nd grade curriculum to get the input of the future of Midland, our young people, in what they hope to see Midland like when they're adults, but also to learn a little bit about the experience of being a young person in Midland and how we can do the best job possible of making Midland a great place to grow up. Finally, one other thing I'll highlight is we've had 2 public surveys to date with over 700 participants during phase 2, which has really been focused on how to prioritize our goals for the plan. We have our 3rd survey out for this current phase right now, which has to do with the future land use and transportation maps. And I think Ryan could probably share a little bit about that.
Great.
Yeah. The future mapping surveys are out now, and they kind of they allow respondents to actually go in there and annotate different comments via a point or a line or even like an area, outline a different area. For future land use comments or future transportation comments. We've gotten a lot of transportation comments so far, kind of outlining or identifying different challenge areas and some good ideas for improving non-motorized or decreasing delay and those kinds of things. So we're super excited for that. Those are out till probably the end of the month, I think. So definitely get out there and look at those surveys.
Hey, we got our first question that has come in all the way from Chris Ferguson. Chris wants to know, how many years does the master plan for?
So that's a great question. So typically, master plan is going to look at a time horizon of somewhere between 10 and 30 years. And in our case, we've primarily been focused on the year 2050, so about 27 years into the future. The plan is going to cast a broad net in terms of what those goals are, because obviously to affect the type of change that was required to achieve the community's vision for the year 2050. That's going to take some time, but the plan itself will be focused on the next 5 to 10 years in terms of goal setting. So what can we do over this next 5 to 10 year period to begin working towards that 2050 vision, to position ourselves for success in the future?
So, question for you: does the city currently operate under a master plan? Have we done the master planning process before?
We do. So the city's current master plan was originally adopted back in 2006, and it's been updated subsequently, most recently in 2018, with some minor updates. But Midland City Modern is Midland's 7th master plan. So the 7th time that we've started from scratch with a master planning process. The first master plan created for Midland was done in 1928, and it was done at the behest of the Midland Kiwanis Club. So it actually was a community-initiated effort. Back in the 1920s, city planning was really getting its start around the country. So a number of communities around the United States created city plans at that time. And looking at that plan, we do, of course, have copies of that 1928 plan. You can see a lot of effect that plan had on creating the Midland we all enjoy today. And then we've obviously had intervening plans on about a decade or by decade basis since 1928. And Midland's done a great job of implementing those plans over the years.
I'm sure you find some really interesting thoughts and ideas, some of which have come to fruition, others that don't. Anything interesting that you've found, as I'm sure you've waded through some of our past master plans?
Absolutely. Master plans are, of course, I find them very fascinating, but I'm a planner. One thing that I will tell you is master plans are usually a great way to sort of get a snapshot of what the community was like at the time they were created and what the most pressing and pertinent concerns are. And sometimes things that seem like they're going to be long-term concerns fade quickly, and other times those concerns end up lasting or maybe misrepresented. So a few things I'd highlight. So going back to our second master plan, which was created right after World War II, two of the big projects identified in that plan were the need for a new Midland Community Center. And so that plan looked at options for where that community center might be located and ultimately recommended Central Park, which is, of course, where the community center was ultimately relocated in 1955 into the current building. Of course, as everyone knows, we're currently working on the next version of that critical community facility right now. The other identified need in that plan was a new M20 bridge over the Tittabawassee River. Of course, at that time, back in 1946-47, the main way to cross the river and head west from Midland was on the Curry Parkway Bridge. That was the M20 bridge. I don't think it would be a stretch to understand why that might have been insufficient for future traffic. And so that project identified a need for a new bridge, and ultimately that bridge was also built in the same year as the community center. 1955 was a big year for big projects in Midland. Kind of on the territory of sometimes these plans will contain a really unusual project. There was a downtown planning study done in the 1970s. I know Selina is a big fan of this, that actually envisioned enclosing Main Street. So turning Main Street into a more of a mall-like setting with a roof over it.
Fremont Street, right?
Yeah. So, an interesting concept. I'm sure there are a variety of reasons why that didn't come to pass. Certainly it would have made downtown a very different place than it is today. But a master plan is meant to determine the needs of the future, and obviously will hope to bring about the identified goals and objectives and achieve that vision through the plan. But we know that the community will continue to change. The needs of the community will be continually evaluated after adoption, and we won't necessarily realize exactly the Midland envisioned in the plan because we'll continue to refine that as we move forward in implementation.
Interesting. So if you're just joining us or you've happened across us on Facebook, this is a pop-up virtual planning studio, and we're talking about Midland City Modern, the master planning process for the next 30 years of Midland. So we invite you to drop your questions in the chat bar, and we will address those. And in the meantime, we'll continue to tell you a little bit more about what's going on with the master planning process. So what's the next phase of Midland City Modern look like after this?
So I can answer that one. So right now we'll be wrapping up our future land use and future transportation maps. That's kind of coming next. So again, those are still out for review and comment through the end of May. But then we'll be drafting the actual plan over the summer, and that will be released for public review in the fall. The official adoption process will begin in the fall and then conclude in early 2024. So really, we're kind of entering a phase of drafting the plan quite extensively in terms of the actual literature and different material that will go into the plan. We'll be working through that. And then, of course, creating the plan is just the beginning. So we'll be implementing the plan after adoption. And then over the next several years, all of us, residents and anyone, all Midlanders, will hopefully remain engaged in this process as we move through.
Yeah, well, we have an engaged viewer right now. Alex wants to know if we're seeing any significant changes in the course of the last master plan or any new topics that may be a surprise to us. And he gives us a little attaboy. Appreciate the efforts that we are putting into this process. So nice job, planning department. So what kind of significant changes are we seeing from the current master plan, and any new surprising stuff coming up that you think we'll see in the new master plan?
Sure, that's a great question. I appreciate the compliment. We certainly have worked very hard to make sure that we were able to work really diligently with the community to create this plan. One thing that I would say, just to set the tone, is that reading back through prior Midland master plans, you get a really strong sense of what this community is all about. And I think some of those core things haven't changed and aren't likely to change in the near term. And that's, this is a place with a lot of pride, a place that values a high quality of life, a high quality of services, that values having parks and having amenities that are available conveniently to where you live and work. This is a place that has struggled with certain issues for a long time, like flooding. And so you see, back to the very first master plan for Midland in 1928, flooding is discussed, and that'll continue to be a theme here. As I said, every master plan also contains little nods to its time. And so we have a plan that was created and adopted in 1980. And, it talks about Iran, the hostage crisis. It talks about inflation and gas prices, concerns about energy availability in the future. And I suspect that they'll be looking back on our plan in 20 or 30 years. We'll probably see some of those same things. Major changes, I think the demographic trends in Midland and in Michigan in general are certainly driving a lot of the things that we're hearing today. So with an aging population, with a lower rate of growth over the last several years, that definitely informs people's perspectives on a number of issues. As an example, talent attraction and retention is something that we've heard a tremendous amount about. A need to bring more skilled workers into the community and do a great job of keeping people here. And that, tying back to housing, childcare, and building connections between businesses and educational institutions in the community, and building on things that are already taking place as well here in Midland. We're also hearing a lot about flooding, and that's to be expected since we've had a tremendous amount of challenges related to flooding over the last 6 years. So we knew going into this process that would certainly remain a significant focus, and perhaps be a slightly higher focus than in the most recent master plan. But I think the major headline here is that people in Midland, by and large, are very satisfied living here. They really value and appreciate a lot of the great attributes of the community that make this a wonderful place to live. And they really want to see those attributes protected and to continue to grow and improve the quality of life here that we all enjoy.
Perfect. Julie's joined us as well, and part of what makes our community so great is our small business. So what does the city master plan do to encourage small business development and growth and long-term support of those small businesses in our community? Does the master plan have much to say on those topics?
It certainly does. I think one thing that I would highlight that we've heard through the process that will tie into implementation of the plan is a desire to reduce regulatory barriers to small business creation. And so one aspect of implementation that we'll be working on is updates to the city zoning ordinance. We've submitted money into the next fiscal year budget to begin that project as soon as this master plan is adopted, and really looking at how can we nurture the development of small businesses, whether they're home-based businesses or moving businesses into existing spaces, allowing for creative adaptation of existing buildings that might be vacant or maybe had a prior use case, whether it was maybe educational or institutional, and how might we rehab and reuse. Those can be challenging buildings to reuse for other purposes, and so what options we might have there. We obviously enjoy really strong partnerships with our local economic development partners, including the Midland Business Alliance, and I think they've been very actively involved with us in this process, both engaging their membership of businesses in the community, but also working with us on what policy and programming options we might have to continue to strengthen Midland's positioning as a good place to do business.
Excellent. And another topic, kind of along the same lines of what makes our community great is obviously housing. And housing for our community runs the gamut from affordable housing to young professional, young income housing. What does the master plan do so far as guidance for housing in our community?
I think hopefully the master plan, our goal, and I think the the feedback we've been receiving, we're hearing a lot of desire for housing in critical sections of the community, whether it's downtown, Center City, Midland Mall area, some of these areas that may not have as much housing as other areas, but really kind of locating it near amenities to kind of be more enticing for people to move to these areas and utilize them and for housing. And then it kind of goes back to redeveloping different areas and allowing housing strategically in some areas and different formats. Really just a large option, just a large amount of options for different housing at the different price points, I think is really important.
And I think it's interesting to compare and contrast that even though we develop a master plan and we say certain housing should go in certain places, it still takes developers to make that happen. What's the difference between just setting aside areas where housing can be developed and recruiting or enticing developers to make that happen?
That's a great question. I think part of our discussion has been what type of housing are we lacking in the community, and are there reasons within the city's control that we might create a pathway for those housing types to exist. So, for example, we've heard from a lot of folks that there's a desire for more for housing that's more friendly to folks who want to age in place. So Midland's got an abundance of larger homes that are well suited to families, especially families with children. They often are in formats where they're multi-story, and there's a lot of folks that are looking for a smaller lot, less to maintain, a one level living situation. And we don't necessarily have the regulatory framework to create that type of housing at the level that it might have demand for in Midland. So our mapping effort, the survey that we're working on right now, would be a great way for people to provide us with feedback on housing and where you might like to see different housing types, because that is one part of that puzzle. Another part is looking at available incentives that the city can offer financially or otherwise to encourage development or redevelopment around the community. And I think the city's historically been very strategic in using those incentives, but there's certainly, especially right now, a variety of new incentives that are available, and those continue to change over time. And so continuing to be strategic about how those incentives are deployed to create new housing types, and then working with local partners to know and understand what they're hearing from their targets for recruitment, because we have heard, and that's not unique to Midland. That's a nationwide issue of, how do folks relocate to new communities for economic opportunity when housing is such a challenge almost everywhere. And so it certainly comes down to, competitiveness. We want to be able to offer people an opportunity to come here and be welcomed into the community, and to continue to create really vibrant and attractive neighborhoods for people at all price points and at all stages of life.
Very good. Okay, we're going to take just a quick minute, and in the meantime, keep sending those questions in. We'll be right back. This is the pop-up virtual planning studio talking about Midland City Master Plan.
Did you know that babies love when you speak to them in an exaggerated, animated, and repetitive way?
Hey, look at this toy. Look at those colors.
Even if they don't have language skills yet, back and forth interaction creates new connections in their brain that help them with language learning. Talk, talk, talk. The more words your baby is exposed to, the more their vocabulary grows. When sung to, babies bond to you and your voice. Create fun songs for daily activities. Hearing familiar songs for wake up, snack time, and other activities helps your baby transition throughout their day. Babies don't care if you're a great singer. Sing with all your heart and bond with your baby.
The itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout.
Let's read together. Research shows that reading to your baby every day builds important connections in their brains to help them learn language, math, and social skills. Interact with your child as you read. Point and talk about what you see. Ask questions, make silly comments, and connect the story to your child's life. Read to your baby every day to build language and literacy skills.
Hey, Midland, we're back. This is your pop-up virtual planning studio talking about Midland City Modern, which is our master planning process that we are just wrapping up a number of community conversations on. And today we're here to take your questions about what the future of Midland looks like, what your hopes, dreams, and aspirations are for our community. I'm your host, Selina Harris, Community Affairs Director for the City of Midland, and we're here with Jacob Kain and Ryan Smith from the Planning Department. Thanks for joining us. So let me just double check, see if we have any new comments coming in. I'm going to kick off with what sort of things are we hearing from your interactions with the community having to do with non-motorized transportation, walking, biking, that sort of things, alternatives to cars in our community?
Sure, a lot. And that's been one of the consistent through lines through all of our engagement activities with people all over the community from all different backgrounds. And I think Ryan alluded to, we're continuing to get strong levels of feedback through our transportation mapping process in terms of people's desires for certain types of infrastructure around the community. Just to kind of boil it down to the high points, I think one thing that we're hearing, which is not surprising, is that people want really high quality infrastructure here for non-motorized use. They want it to be safe and they want it to be well maintained. And so that ranges from discussions about snow removal in the winter to just general maintenance, making sure sidewalks are level, that repairs are timely, and that we've got the connections we need around the community to make the network really usable for folks. The other thing we've heard quite a bit about is that people want things. They don't just want non-motorized facilities. They want to be able to get to places that they want to go on those facilities. And so providing amenities along facilities and using facilities to connect amenities. So just as an example, we've heard a lot of feedback about connecting the Discovery Square area, so the Midland Center for the Arts, the library, Dow Gardens, to downtown, and how can we do the best job possible of connecting those two critical areas of the community both through non-motorized, but also motorized transportation. How can we leverage the proximity of the districts to each other so that they're really accessible by visitors and by the Midland community? That's really been kind of the focus. And so our mapping exercise is helping us to look at where those critical opportunities are from a long-term standpoint, critical connections that we can make between different parts of the community so that we can both leverage what we already have, but continue to improve the quality of life in the future.
Excellent. So question coming in from a viewer, Gustin, who wants to know, what is the plan regarding bringing or incentivizing other large employers that will help drive and sustain the population growth in Midland?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say at this point that plan looks much like our current strategy and strategies in that regard. So obviously, first and foremost, from an economic development perspective, we look at opportunities to leverage the economic drivers we already have. So are there suppliers? Are there relationships between some of our current employers and other vendors or employers that we can leverage to bring new opportunities to the community? Or do we have skill sets within our workforce that we can use to leverage to bring folks here where they know that they can find qualified candidates to do certain type of work? Right now, frankly, we struggle in the attraction area because of a lack of workforce. So we got more jobs than we've got people to fill them. And we have trouble placing people here because we don't have the housing to support them and to make it easy for them to relocate into Midland or the region as a whole. And so we've got some initiatives going right now that are really targeted at that housing question. We've also got some initiatives going right now that target the childcare part of the puzzle. Childcare struggles for a lot of the same reasons that our employers do in general, trying to find workforce of people that can provide that childcare. And then obviously getting people into the workforce, you need to have the childcare. So we've got a bit of a chicken and egg situation of how to get folks back to work that would like to work. Obviously, we're seeing unemployment at all-time lows around the country. And so we do have a lot of people already in the workforce. So how do we continue to nurture that and continue to make Midland a competitive community from an economic perspective? It's not an easy solution. And there's a lot of factors that are going to fall outside of one municipality's control. But certainly it's a focus area because I think what we've heard from most folks is that they do want to see the community continue to thrive and prosper in the future, and growth is part of that prosperity picture.
Excellent. So Alex is back with another question. What do we consider to be Midland's greatest natural strength? How does that affect strategy and decision making?
I mean, we could probably both take this. I would say, depending on how you define natural. So if we're talking about from an environmental perspective, or a geographic perspective, I think Midland's got a lot of opportunity to leverage from its location in the state. Being in the center from a logistics perspective is really powerful. I think that some of our kind of built-in strengths are the quality of life that we provide our residents. Quality of life is a huge driver to talent attraction and retention. And so we've got a huge head start on that a lot of communities do not. And so that's a huge built-in strength. From my perspective on the second part, and then Ryan can weigh in on some strengths, I think, how does that affect our strategy? I think that it's important to know what your strengths are and to figure out how you can leverage those, but also to not rest on your laurels. And so just because you're known for having a good quality of life today doesn't mean that quality of life will necessarily sustain itself 27 years into the future. And what people's expectations are for quality of life is going to change over time. So just to give you an example from a recreation perspective, pickleball didn't exist as an amenity, that people desired even 5 years ago, really. And now people all over the country are looking for facilities for pickleball. So if you're going to provide quality of life that includes recreation, and you've got to be thinking about what people's recreational needs are today and what those needs might be 20 years in the future so that you can continue to be competitive.
Yeah, no, that's definitely well said there. I would agree with you. Quality of life. In terms of the greatest natural strengths. As Jacob said, the geographical position that Midland is in is a good one. The nature of kind of people wanting to spend time outdoors. We have quite a bit of access to different options, either with lakes not too far, kind of in any direction, and then rivers as well. So there's a lot of things in the master plan about preserving our natural habitat. So we're really trying to bake that into the strategy of the master plan, preserving that sort of stuff. Again, kind of just thinking like natural strengths.
Yeah, the river is a great example because the way communities look at their waterways today is so different from the way that communities historically have looked at their waterways. And it's true in almost every community, including Midland, where, historically the river was a place where you had industry. It was a place where you might dump your sewage. It wasn't treated as an amenity for recreation. It wasn't viewed as an aesthetic benefit necessarily to the community, and it could often present a threat to the community during times of flooding when less was known about how to proactively prevent and avoid flooding risks. So now today, as we look forward, there's a lot of conversation about how do we continue to leverage the river as a recreational amenity. And I see on the screen we're sharing some of the visioning that's already taken place for the riverfront adjacent to downtown. But how do we best orient that riverfront as an opportunity for residents and visitors? How do we continue to ensure that the river is clean and available for use? How do we treat that riverbank and really opening up views of the river and removing invasive species that we've talked a bit about with the community? How do we address some of those challenges as we move forward? And, there's a lot of opportunity to continue to build on some of the great work that's taken place already to better leverage Midland's rivers. We also are blessed to have more than one. So how do we continue to leverage those rivers as a way to define this community?
Very good. So as we kind of start to wind down the program, again, if there are more questions coming in, we're happy to stick around and answer those. But as we begin to wind down today's virtual pop-up, tell us a little bit about just what the importance of a master planning process is. What do we have to do one? Why do we go through this?
It's not just for the love of planning.
Guess we love to plan.
Just love to plan. I mean, I'd say the first and most important, and then Ryan can weigh in on some of the other benefits, but it is a requirement in the state of Michigan that communities adopt a master plan. And so that's one important reason why we and other communities do master planning. But I think there's a lot of more important reasons than compliance with state statute that we in Midland undertake this process.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this process is really important for the community, all the community. It really allows them to identify a vision for the future. This includes things like addressing risks, vulnerabilities, and prioritizing resources for those activities. Again, we're kind of treating it as a way to enable the community to take those tangible steps towards that vision over the next several years. So we really want it to be kind of a document that people are constantly referring back to. How are we progressing forward, following this plan? Not just something that we write and throw on a shelf. We really want it to be a tool that the community can use. And different members of the community and different organizations, different stakeholders. We're all stakeholders in this, so that's kind of the hope.
Absolutely, and we realize that folks are going to have different ideas about what the future should be, and so this process gives us an opportunity to bring people together to talk about those differing perspectives on what's desired in the future. And our goal ultimately is to identify a cohesive vision that most Midlanders can get behind, and to really chart out a roadmap of how do we get there. So we're not going to get from point A to point B overnight. It's going to take a lot of work over a lot of years on a number of different fronts to achieve that idealized vision of the future. But, we've done this 6 times before, and been successful in realizing the vision and continuing to make Midland an even better place to live, work, and play. And so we're very confident that this plan will enable that success over the next couple decades.
Okay, 2 more questions came in while you were wrapping those comments up. From our friend Eric Anders. What are several examples of the creative adaptations in zoning ordinances and affordable housing plans?
So that could go in a number of different ways. We've talked with folks at the Planning Commission. We had a presentation just a couple of weeks back about different housing types that communities around the state are looking at. How do you encourage some housing types that haven't been built as frequently over the last several decades? What are the obstacles to their creation? The Michigan Municipal League has been really pivotal in promoting some strategies that people can use. So they actually created some design templates that communities can use, that developers can pick up, or private homeowners, and kind of simplify the process of how do you situate, for example, a 2-family dwelling on a traditional city lot. That can be a challenge because the traditional city lot's usually narrow and deep. A lot of the more recent 2-family home plans tend to be wide and shallow, and so situating them on a city lot can be a challenge. So they took that on. They also recommended some changes that communities can make to their permitting processes to help to kind of reduce the friction of permitting processes to make things easier. We've taken a look at our own current codes to say, how would some desirable development formats be treated under our codes? So are there regulatory hurdles that are standing in the way of market creation of certain housing types? And kind of looking at how we could adjust those codes to be more permissive of certain desirable types of development in certain locations around the community as we move forward into that zoning amendment process.
Okay. Alex is back and is talking about several large state economic development projects, bringing business into the state. Can we speak to any work being done to attract these projects?
Sure. So, the City of Midland primarily works with our partners at the Midland Business Alliance on that attraction and retention of employers into Midland County. And then we also work with our partners at the Great Lakes Bay Regional Alliance to look at strategies for regional attraction. When you look at the numbers, you see, and I think intuitively, most folks in Midland understand that there's a lot of cross traffic between the Tri-City communities in our region, folks that live or work in Bay City, Saginaw, or Midland and commute into another community. And so, when another community in the region is successful, we're all successful. That's a good thing. And so, one of the emerging trends right now is looking at these super sites. So how do you site like a massive facility? The city of Marshall recently secured a Ford electric battery plant, and that was a super site selection process. So Midland has been actively working on those processes as well, and trying to attract the right employers that are well suited for the talent that we already have here. That was another, going back to the question about natural strengths, which was also Alex's question. That's another natural strength that Midland offers, is that we have a really highly educated population, and we've got folks here that have incredible skill sets that are really unique. And so, being able to differentiate Midland compared to other communities in Michigan and around the country is a great opportunity for us as we look at retention and attraction of major employers. But it's a challenge. Economic development attraction is difficult, and it's very tempting to get into the incentives game, where you look at tax incentives and really whittle down the community's financial benefits from a project in order to secure it. And so it requires a lot of balance. But we're working on what we can at the city level, which, like I said, is primarily looking at the housing piece, looking at the quality of life piece that we know is really important, and tackling things like childcare that we know are acute concerns of our current employers.
Excellent. Skip to a question from Nicholas. Master plans have many goals for a community, from the achievable to the large and visionary. What's something visionary that you're seeing through this master planning process and ideas coming from the community?
That's a great question.
Like domes over Main Street.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, yeah, that is a great example. We are striving to be, on balance, pragmatic about what we forecast here for the community, because looking at current trends, which most master plans do look at, what do the trends look like today, and what as best as we can, well, how do we predict that those trends are going to take us in the future? And we do think that, overall in the region and in the state, growth is going to be, relatively limited. We think Midland's well positioned to experience slight growth over the planning period. And so opportunities for like major, earth shattering changes are going to be limited by and large. But we are looking at what's coming. So some of the things that we've worked really diligently at identifying our strengths and weaknesses currently are around renewable energy. So how can we position ourselves to be prepared for not only what is available today for renewable energy, but also for the future? Tied in with that, we've talked quite a bit about electrification of vehicles. So both at a municipal level and also for the community at large, how can Midland be well positioned to that transition to electric vehicles that's anticipated over the planning horizon? Some of the outside, so this master plan doesn't exist in a vacuum either. And so there's been a number of planning efforts that have been more focused that have taken place around Midland over the last several years. And there's a few that are still in process. So that riverfront visioning is a great example of something that's really specifically targeted at one place, which is the downtown riverfront, but that's going to inform and help to it'll be a critical part of our overall goals for this plan of looking at how can we remain competitive in that quality of life piece. And so those are, I think, this plan in particular, there's no question this is visionary. This is a significant vision for how this space can be improved and utilized and leveraged as an amenity for not only downtown Midland, but the larger community. And so those are the kind of things I would focus on. We're not looking to enclose Main Street or any street in the city of Midland moving forward. And, I think that the retaining the things that we value here already is a big part of the plan. So how do we maintain momentum with our strengths as they exist? And it's not quite as glamorous as the big visionary plan, but I think it's probably more important to be thinking about what do we have here that is great, and how can we continue to make those things greater as we move forward in time.
So here's a question we've already kind of hit on, but I think we can broaden this. Where will people be able to read all the feedback that has been given through this process? This question specifically speaks to non-motorized transportation, which maybe you could cover again just briefly, but in general, where will people be able to see all the comments and thoughts that have been shared throughout this very long process of input?
Sure. No, that's a great question. So we've already reported out to the Planning Commission the results of the 2 public surveys that we launched earlier this year. So all of that feedback, including every individual comment that was made by any respondent was provided to the Planning Commission just a while back in their special meeting packet. And so that information is all available through the city's agenda center at midland-mi.org. We'll continue to report out feedback as we receive it through this process. This whole phase 2 process has been designed to be iterative so that as we get new feedback, we bring it back to the Planning Commission, give the Planning Commission a chance to respond. We haven't really talked about that in this process, but the Planning Commission under state law drives the master planning process. So they've been really critical at setting the the overall goals of the process, endorsing the plan to engage the community, and then they've been working diligently at various elements of the plan as we've received public input, incorporating that into the plan as well. But I would say you'll see that also reported out as the draft document takes shape. Reporting out on this process is going to be a really key part of that, and documenting what this process is all has been about. What we've heard from around the community, and how that is reflected back in the plan document itself.
And are we getting massive amounts of feedback on non-motorized transportations, in your opinion?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't use the word massive. I would say that the feedback from the community has been pretty balanced. Pretty much everybody that we've chatted with throughout this process has like an issue that they're really passionate about, and then a couple other issues that are sort of lower on the passion scale, but that they're still interested in. And then, we've been really focused on conversation in this process. So being out in the community, doing things like this, where it's not a one-way conversation, but a two-way conversation. How can we kind of drill down and ask people questions about things that maybe they didn't show up to talk to us about, but we still want to hear what they think, so that we can get a really broad and balanced perspective on people's goals and desires for Midland.
Right. Another question from Guston. Is there a stage of life group that has a noticeably more input in the population of Midland? So is it young, growing families, young adults, early career retirees? Also, understanding that Midland wants to attract people of all ages and stages of life, is there a group that the plan focuses on more than others?
So we're definitely focused on everyone in the community in this plan. We have been everywhere from senior services to the public schools. We've been at high school hockey games, and we've been at coffee shops, and we've been, where else have we been? We've been all over town. And we found, I think, in most of our events that we've had, with the exception of the school outreach, because that's obviously a pretty more narrow age target. But when we've been out in the community in a more general setting, that we've had folks from, we spoke with a lady at the community center at our event that I think she was in her 90s, and she was actually an original staff member of the community center. I sure hope I got her age right. She might be mad at me if I misrepresented that. But down to, we've had people bring their kids who are very young, and we've had conversations with them, that are not even, they're preschool aged, about what they think about Midland and what they care about and what they'd like to see in the community. So the plan's going to touch on the needs of everyone in the community, but we understand that those needs are not the same at all times. There's plenty of commonality in what people are looking for, but there's also specific needs for each age group. What we do know from a demographic perspective, though, is that Midland is aging. The average age of the community is rising, and there are fewer children and young people here than there were during the last planning process. And so that obviously influences a number of things from what people are looking for amenities in the community. There's been a lot of feedback about what people are looking for that are approaching retirement age, from a housing perspective, from a recreational perspective. And then, there's a lot of concern from I think that same age group about how do we keep their kids here? They want their kids and grandkids to be in Midland. So what can we do to continue to make Midland even a more enticing place for working age folks? That's going to be a big part of the plan as well.
Okay. And one last question that we already kind of hit on, but let's speak to it one more time. What specific city initiatives target the lack of affordable housing and childcare in Midland? And again, how does this work as part of the master planning process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think this may be in reference to something I alluded to earlier, where we have for the childcare question, there's actually a regional working group that was recently convened that's looking at how do we issues in creating and providing childcare around the region. There's a lot of challenges, many of which a municipal government can't tackle, but these are working groups that include folks from the childcare industry. These include parents, they include employers, they include local governments. And so looking at everything from, providing competitive wages to regulatory barriers at the state and local level to childcare creation to workforce development issues to working with employers on, maybe employers providing childcare options within their own facilities. And so that's really just kind of getting off the ground right now. On the housing front, I think a major new initiative is the work through the Midland Business Alliance on Housing Forward, which is looking at many of the same type of issues that child care working group is looking at. What state and local incentives already exist? How can we best leverage those to get the type of housing that Midland needs the most? They're primarily focused on workforce housing because the MBA has heard, and we've heard through this process very strongly that our employers are finding housing to be a critical barrier to attracting and retaining talent in the region. And so they're looking at everything from, local regulatory to incentives to I'm trying to think of some other examples. We're potentially some pilot programs to demonstrate some different housing types around the community to encourage folks to create those housing types, unlocking some of our capacity for housing by giving people that maybe are choosing one price point or one type of housing because it's all they can find. It best suits their needs, but it doesn't fully suit their needs. So maybe creating more housing products that would better suit their needs and opening that housing up for folks that might be currently competing for that housing, driving costs up and reducing the available supply. So not a simple answer, but there's a lot of different things currently going on. And that's just kind of a sample of those.
Okay. Awesome conversations. We really appreciate the community checking in with us tonight and joining in the conversation. As we start to wind down, remind us what the process is next, and if somebody has continued comment that they would like to give to this process, what's their window of opportunity for doing that?
Yeah, definitely contact the planning department if you have comments. Subscribe to our newsletter through our midlandcitymodern.com website. Like I said, you can definitely contact Jacob or I, or really anyone at the city, and definitely stay engaged. Like I said, the newsletter for sure. And then just stay tuned to some of our social posts, Facebook, YouTube, things like that. And then, hopefully we'll have a draft plan here. That's kind of the next biggest thing.
Yeah, we're going to continue to host pop-up planning studios through the adoption of the plan. So that'll be over the rest of this year. So keep your eyes posted to the website and the city's social media channels to learn about where we'll be in June and every month from there. So those are great opportunities. As we move in, we're concluding our major public engagement part of the process this month with our survey on the maps and with tonight's pop-up studio, but we'll be, continuing to work on the draft plan and welcome people to join us as we're working on that plan out in the community. They can look over our shoulder and see the draft plan that we're working on. They can provide us with comments or feedback. And then when that draft plan is released this fall, that'll be released to the public so that the public can review it, hold us accountable. Have we heard you? Have we captured what you feel are the needs of the community and what your vision is for the future? And then there'll be lots of opportunities through that, both the informal and formal parts of the adoption procedure for folks to be part of that. And I think really more important than anything, as important as creating the plan is, implementation is so much more important. And so we really appreciate how engaged folks around the community have been with us in this current phase, but also through phase one. It's been, we're going to be about 2.5 years of planning by the time this plan is adopted. And so we appreciate everybody sticking with us and being actively participating throughout our various plan activities. But implementation is really where this plan becomes reality. And so we're going to want to see everyone continue to be part of this process over the next several years.
Excellent. And maybe we'll do this pop-up virtual planning session again, because this was really kind of fun. It's a great way for folks to engage. We all get so busy with our lives, and the idea of leaving the house for another meeting is most days not very attractive. So this is a good way to be interactive with our community and get those questions and concerns answered. So thank you again for joining us. Jacob, Ryan, you did a great job. And you can continue to follow this process on midlandcitymodern.com. Read up on everything at your leisure and follow along as we take this a little more forward in the process. So on behalf of the City of Midland, thanks for joining us. Have a good evening.
Did you know that babies love when you speak to them in an exaggerated, animated, and repetitive way?
Hey, look at this toy. Look at those colors.
Even if they don't have language skills yet, back and forth interaction creates new connections in their brain that help them with language learning. Talk, talk, talk. The more words your baby is exposed to, the more their vocabulary grows. When sung to, babies bond to you and your voice. Create fun songs for daily activities. Hearing familiar songs for wake up, snack time, and other activities helps your baby transition throughout their day. Babies don't care if you're a great singer. Sing with all your heart and bond with your baby.
The itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout.
Let's read together. Research shows that reading to your baby every day builds important connections in their brains to help them learn language, math, and social skills. Interact with your child as you read. Point and talk about what you see. Ask questions, make silly comments, and connect the story to your child's life. Read to your baby every day to build language and literacy skills.